Welcome in, everybody, to another edition of the best in paranormal talk radio. This is Beyond the Darkness. I'm Tim Dennison for Dave Schrader, who is, let's just say, on his way back from a lovely time in Las Vegas for the Super Bowl. I hope you had a great Super Bowl weekend as well. We're finally ready to be rid of all of you from our Minneapolis area, although we did have a good time hosting the Super Bowl this year. And we hope you had a good weekend as well, even if you don't like football. We hope you enjoyed the Kitten Bowl, whatever it was you were watching, the Kitten Bowl, the Puppy Bowl, whatever it was you happened to be watching on television. We've got a great show today, folks. We'll get to it here in just a second. I want to remind you, Dave wanted me to remind you about the Romania trip, which you can get details on right now at darknessevents.com. Lots of great stuff to see. Vlad Tepes's castle, among other things. It's not just the same old Romania trip that Dave has told you about in the past or that they've been on in the past. If you've been on the Romania trip in the past, there are new destinations, new things to see, and you can get all the details at darknessevents.com. It's on sale right now. I believe September is when they're taking off for lovely Romania and the different paranormal destinations there. Again, darknessevents.com. And be sure to get your tickets because they are going quickly. So you're going to want to join Dave out in Romania in the fall in September. And be sure to grab your ticket for that. Also, Chris Jericho's Rock and Wrestling Rager. Dave and I are honored and esteemed guests for that. We'll be doing some talks on the ship. There's also the Sea of Honor tournament going on there as well. The boys from Ring of Honor Wrestling, the Bullet Club are going to be there. Also, all the podcasters from the Jericho Network will be there as well. Raven will be there. The guys from Keeping It 100 will be there. Lance Storm and Don Callis will be there as well from their show. Conan and all those guys will be there. It's going to be amazing. It's going to be a great time. ChrisJerichoCruise.com. You put $150 down and you reserve your cabin. And, of course, you can join us on the high seas right around Halloween, folks. It's, I think, October 27th through the 31st. And we sail out of Miami and we head for the Bahamas. So it's going to be a great time there as well. So we're going to have a good time there. ChrisJerichoCruise.com. We'll look forward to seeing you there. Also at darknessevents.com, Dave and I will be at Michigan Paracon in August. I know I'm throwing a bunch of dates at you here, but you got to get your travel together. Now is the cold time of year, and you got to be thinking about warm destinations. Michigan Paracon in August. It's one of the events that Dave and I will be appearing at together. Be sure to get your tickets for Sault Ste. Marie, the lovely destination that, especially in the summertime, Sault Ste. Marie, Michigan is Michigan Paracon at the Keewatin Casino. Be sure to get your tickets for that as well. DarknessEvents.com is where you can find out where Dave and I will be around the country and around the world. Be sure to go to DarknessEvents.com. All right, folks, we have an exciting show today, and we want to bring in our guest right now. John David Miller is the author of a new book, and it's a different take on the paranormal, different than what we normally talk about. 15 years ago, and while on a dive trip off the coast of Papua New Guinea, our guest purchased a piece of property in the Appalachian Mountains of Virginia. He'd never seen it and knew nothing about it. Okay, now after closing, and by chance, he discovered his mother's maiden name written on the bottom corner of the plot, and it goes from there. We'll talk about how it ties into the paranormal and how it changed our guest's views on the paranormal. Our guest is John David Miller, who has written this book. The book is called The Sibold Effect, and let's welcome in now our guest, David Miller. Dave, how are you doing today?
Oh, doing great. Glad to be here.
Thank you very much for joining us. Now, the entire title of the book is The Sibold Effect, Beyond Science, History, Ghosts, and the Appalachian Supernatural, correct?
That's correct.
All right. And just so we let people know right off the bat, they can get that on Amazon.com, is that correct?
Sure. Amazon, print, and Kindle, and it's also on iBooks also.
All right. And we'll have a link up as well to let you guys follow it and be sure to pick up the book as well at that link. So I want to jump into it in a different kind of way here, Dave. I want to talk a little bit about paranormal with you because we all have our different let's just say beginnings in the paranormal and things that get us inspired. And one of the things that Dave and I talked about yesterday was the fact that Zachary Quinto, who plays Mr. Spock in the new Star Trek movies, is kind of following in the footsteps of Leonard Nimoy. And I know a lot of us were inspired by In Search Of. I mean, we watched the old In Search Of shows and got inspired a little bit to look into the paranormal by that. And that kind of got us fired up, because we're kind of excited to see someone take up that mantle from Leonard Nimoy. And that got our, depending on what generation, and we talked about this on the show before, depending on what generation you're from, it was either In Search Of, or it was another show, Sightings, or other shows that kind of piqued our curiosity into the paranormal. Did you have either an experience or a TV show or something that made you even remotely curious about the paranormal, or were you a skeptic before your event happened to you?
Well, it kind of goes back to my childhood, and I do explain it in the book. And I really didn't figure out all this until I was writing the book. It took me 3 years to write and research the book. And when I started the book, I didn't know how it was going to end. So I had to go over all these things. What did I believe in, or when did I start believing in it? And I did figure it out. It all came together, and it was all connected at the end of the story. Mm-hmm. But it goes back for me. It goes back to my childhood. I'm looking back now. I guess I had a very unusual childhood. Both my parents, on both sides of my father's family, were the Millers. My mother's side were the Sibolds, and they lived across the street from each other in a little town called Greenville, West Virginia. And every summer I would spend all summer long with my grandparents, and I would, alternate houses where I slept at night. But that wasn't the unusual part. The unusual part is around Greenville, Greenville, West Virginia. By the way, it's a Greenville in every single state. That's why I'm kind of messed up there. But in Greenville, West Virginia,
I don't know that we have one in Minnesota. I didn't mean to interrupt, but I don't know that. I'll have to look, though. But go ahead.
You might be right. I was just always told that. And I've always found a Greenville. I think Hawaii might not be one either. But surrounding Greenville, this little tiny mill town in Greenville, West Virginia, they had a place called Cook's Fort, and it was built by the early settlers. And and as I was a kid, my grandparents used to tell me stories about how the fort was attacked every single day by Indians. And that fascinated me, these stories. And around Greenville, there was a cave system called the Saltpeter Cave System. It's about 5 miles worth of caves, and you could go in one entrance and go for a mile or two and come out another entrance on the side of a mountain. And I played in these caves every single day. And we played flashlight war. We played hide and seek. We played anything you could imagine. And this cave system was its own ecosystem. They would stay about 55 degrees all year long, even in the middle of the winter. And we learned how to enter the caves and how we would go into where it was total darkness. Then you would turn your lights off and sit there for 15 minutes in the dark so your eyes would get accustomed to the darkness. And then when you cut your lights back on, you could see everything just like daytime. It was fantastic. So we learned all the little tricks and trades, and we actually explored these caves every single day. And one of these spots in the cave system was called the Devil's Writing Table, and it was a long round tunnel. And you would walk down the tunnel, and the tunnel would get smaller and smaller to the point where you had to actually crawl on your knees. And at the end of this tunnel, or as what I was thinking was the end of this tunnel, there was a flat rock that cut the tunnel in half. It was like all I could get out of my head. Everything that was in my head was a symbol of a circle with a horizontal line crossing the middle of it. And for some reason, that symbol stayed with me always. 'Cause I felt at that time it was a very well, I wouldn't call it a paranormal experience then, but looking back on it, I felt chill bumps up and down my spine. Mm-hmm. I knew something very special about this place, and all I pictured for the rest of my life was a circle with a horizontal line. And it turns out that played a big role into my future.
That's a good tease. Now, let me ask you this, Dave, without getting too far into the story before it's time to kind of paraphrase Orson Welles.
Sure.
When you first see the symbol, I mean, a lot of people would say at that point you're having an intuitive experience when you see this.
Yes.
Was it something you felt was good or evil? I mean, because we have those as kids, we have these intuitive experiences when we meet when we meet people, when we run across people, we go, I have a feeling that person's a good person or they're a not so good person. When you first get this impression of this symbol, do you think this is good or this is bad?
Well, I remember it vividly. I remembered and I remembered it being intuitive. I remembered it was the feeling that I had. I felt at that moment that something was trying to communicate with me personally. Mm-hmm. I know it's weird, but I felt very personal about this. That something was communicating directly to me, but it was not scary at all. It was exhilarating. It was very uplifting. It was very positive, which kind of threw me for a loop, because that's why I really didn't associate with paranormal, because you talk paranormal, well, that's ghosts and hauntings, and this couldn't be that, because this is exciting. But you slough off the feelings you have as just internal feelings you had at that moment. You don't think they're profound at that moment.
Do you think as you're going into a place that's talking about the devil's drawing table, do you automatically, I mean, you know, that's kind of setting you up for a negative experience automatically when you're walking in, especially as a child. Do you think at that point as you're walking in, you're setting yourself up for a negative experience, or as a kid, are you walking in with an open mind?
Well, as a kid in playing in these caves, we had always heard stories about a lot of different places in the caves. We had a place called the Round Room, where you'd come over a mound and you were in a completely round room with no exits. And if you had to know exactly where you had to cross over a certain mound to get out of there. But these, and there was another place called the Strawberry, which is a big rock shaped like a strawberry that I heard people had to climb over. You could climb over it, but people had been injured doing that. So these were all places in the caves that we had heard about. They were just part of the neat part about being in the caves. You know, there were there were creeks going through the caves. There were pools of water with salamanders that had no eyes.
Whoa.
Because they didn't need eyes in a total darkness. So it was all part of the mystique of these caves that we just were excited about. We just looked forward to every day, just go in there, and it really just hit that nerve of adventure. You know, every day was a new adventure, and that's the way we looked at it. We never was it scary, foreboding. It was always exciting. Well, what are we going to discover this day?
Man, you want to talk about Darwinian. Salamanders with no eyes, huh?
Yeah. Well, you know, I'm assuming they were salamanders. They could have been some other type of reptile. I'm not sure. But they were swimming around in the water, and they had no eyes. And we used to go look for them with our flashlights.
That is kind of creepy, especially if you're, I mean, when you're in unknown territory. But I get it, though. I mean, there's a logical explanation. But at that point, too, I mean, as a kid, your imagination takes a hold of you, and you see something that you're not used to seeing, and you got to kind of, I mean, your mind's got to play tricks on you.
Yeah, but I guess it was our attitude, and that we felt so comfortable in those caves because we played them from morning till night, and we even camped out. We'd camp out in the middle of the winter when it's 5 degrees outside. We'd camp out at the entrance of a cave because the warm air would be coming out of the cave and keep us warm. Mm-hmm. Or you could you learn things like if you go in the caves, you always put your fire. You know, if you build a fire, build it between you and the entrance, because that's the way the air is flowing. You know, so you learn all the tricks. But it was all exciting. It was all just. We actually loved those caves. I really got a personal feeling from those caves that they were alive.
Well, now knowing you did that at that tender age, would you allow the kids in your life to do that?
Probably not. Probably not. But that's why I felt all growing up in my childhood that I was alone in the world having this experience. I mean, who else has their own ecosystem they play in every day?
Right.
And you didn't run into other people. These were private caves, so I just felt very unique. I felt very different from everybody else because I was experiencing these experiences.
Let me ask you this, Dave. Now, so you've had the Devil's Drawing Table. Man, that is
it's a Devil's Writing Table.
Devil's Writing Table. I'm sorry. Drawing is for lower minions. So
that's right.
Devil's Writing Table. So you've had this experience with the Devil's Writing Table, which is quite colorful when you talk about names that are given to different things. So, are there other experiences that happened to you in childhood that kind of make you or shape your paranormal outlook? Did you have anything like dream visitations or even did you see things that you might have thought were spirits or anything having to do with UFOs or aliens or?
Well, of course, I got to that tender age in my teens where UFOs were. Actually, I talk about it in the book. When I was 12 years old, I read the book Chariots of the Gods.
Okay.
And that changed my whole outlook on everything. And what I wanted to do more in life later on was to explore ancient ruins and fly over the Nazca lines in Peru.
Oh, yeah.
And I ended up doing that, and that's part of the book. And that also is connected to my property that I bought.
So there's Nazca lines in it too, huh? Very interesting.
The Nazca lines are in there. But the Chariots of Gods changed my whole view of everything.
Now, let me ask you this. When it comes to the Chariot of the Gods, a lot of people have cited that as a kind of a earth-shattering movement in the way that they look at things, especially as far as aliens and UFOs and even creationism is concerned. What was it about that book that really changed the way that you look at things? What really struck you?
Well, I can tell you, and I do explain it in the book, and I do have pictures in the book because when I did fly over the Nazca lines, I was looking for the astronaut on the side of the mountain. Mm-hmm. Do you know the figure I'm talking about?
Yes. Yeah.
It's a large figure. It looks like he has a space helmet on. Mm-hmm. And when I saw that picture in the book, that told me immediately that there were people in other planets or other worlds or whatever visiting the Earth. And that changed everything in my religion. It changed everything. It just proved to me that these places do exist. Aliens do exist.
Now let me play devil's advocate with you, the devil's drawing advocate, if you will, not the writing advocate, but the drawing advocate, because of the picture. Get it? It's a sad joke, Dave. Now I've done a presentation in the past having to do with aliens in Renaissance art, and there has a lot to do with sometimes. When painters would go to interpret things in art, they had no other way to interpret things but to paint it a certain way. So when they would interpret the sun and the moon, they would put a man in what looked like a rocket ship to represent the moon, or a man in what looked like a spherical object to represent the sun. Sure. And of course, in our imagination, in this day and age, in advanced technology, we go, well, of course that's a celestial traveler in a spaceship. Why else would they paint something that looks like something metallic and put that there? If it weren't, if they weren't painting literally, they didn't have that type of imagination. Well, sometimes I don't think we give enough credit to the artisans of that time either, that they had to figure out a way to interpret for generations to come, or maybe it's a different interpretation than what we would ever have now, a different frame of mind.
Sure.
So I would ask you this. I'm going to take it one step further with you. We'll talk theory for a minute. Okay. And I'll play, skeptical's advocate. We'll put it that way.
Sure.
Dave and I have had the discussion a lot on the show. My partner in crime here. And I've always thrown the belief at him, and I don't know why I come up with this belief, other than my own jaded experience. In that, I guess I'm the X-Files I want to believe guy, where Dave has had his experiences and seen things in the sky. He's been to Trout Lake, Washington, and seen the stuff on the SETI Ranch. I myself look up in the sky and I look for something. And I've seen something that was a little different and sketchy as far as a light in the sky that changed directions very quickly. But I've never seen anything with multicolor lights that's been relatively close to me, or nothing fluorescent that's moved like a manta in the sky like he has. I've never really seen anything that, to me, I could say, well, you know what, this could be something, from a different planet. And even so, if I were to see one of these, like, say, triangle-shaped craft flying overhead, the first thing that hits me is that has to be military, not necessarily our military, but it could be another military flying over our space and maybe gathering intelligence. Because in my mind, at least in my mind, I'm thinking that we're so far ahead of ourselves in technology, and you always hear the adage, whatever you're holding in your hand now, like, say, your smartphone, we were working on that 10 to 20 years ago. And we're getting, in the consumer market, we're getting what the military was probably working on 10 to 20 years ago. And we're getting hand-me-down technology while they're continuing either the space program, which seems to be almost non-existent now, the space program, or the military has been working on, and eventually we'll get that hand-me-down technology. The Internet's a great example. We eventually get the hand-me-downs from what the government has been working on in the past.
Sure.
So I guess in my mind, I see one of these crafts and I think, if I see a craft the size of a football field and it looks like a triangle, I'm looking at it going, well, why do we need such a huge transport ship? And I'm thinking, is it because humanity is essentially destroying itself on a day-by-day basis? And this isn't a political agenda. This isn't saying, we're killing our atmosphere. Maybe we're getting ready to kill ourselves in some great war. Who knows? Maybe some government has an idea that I don't. And maybe we're getting ready to, tear each other apart in some sort of war. I mean, look at Philadelphia this weekend. After they win the Super Bowl, they tore their own city apart. And they did that over a dumb trophy. You never know. Maybe they're preparing transport ships to take us the heck out of here. You never know.
That's right. Well, I have had sightings on this property that I bought. It's in the Appalachian Mountains. I've had a number of sightings. I even had the stealth bomber fly over my house, directly over my house twice. And if you've ever seen the stealth bomber fly over your house, it's a very odd thing. It looks like a big boomerang, and we didn't hear it until it passed over the house. So I didn't hear it coming, but it passed over the house. And I also seen many lights in the sky that were unexplainable, that didn't blink, that they acted weird. And but to be honest with you, I associated all that with black ops, not UFOs, because I was right in the middle of the discovery in the mountains, and what I had have discovered up there is not what our government or our educational system wants us to know. And so I associated all this stuff with black ops, and I even saw 2 black helicopters fly by one day. Totally black, no writings on them whatsoever. So my mind, I'm always very imaginative, but I always associated that all toward black ops, spying on me. And I used to joke about it with my friends that I could be sleeping at night and they'd just fly over my house. They could see me in bed through the roof. They'd just shoot me through the roof and kill me right there in bed with no problem at all. So I shouldn't worry about it so much anymore. But I always believed in UFOs anyway, because I've seen a lot of things. But like you said, you can interpret what you see in many different ways. Right. In fact, I write in the book all about pareidolia, which is it's the seeing Jesus in your toast, right. That sort of thing. You know.
Yeah.
That plays a big part with the story, actually.
Okay, and like I said, we'll get to that here in just a bit, and we'll dive headfirst into that.
Okay.
So it's fair to say you have a healthy belief in UFO, whether it be man-made, alien, mineral, or vegetable.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
And after the discoveries in the book, even more so.
Okay. All right. Let me ask you this, because as we're dealing with property, let's deal in cryptids. Have you had experience with cryptids, or is it something that's on your radar?
Well, explain to me what they are.
Well, cryptids, as in Bigfoot, Sasquatch, Chupacabra, animals that don't
sure.
quite...
Oh, sure. Yeah. When you find out more about when I tell you more about my book, you'll see why. I absolutely believed in all that stuff.
All right. Yeah. It's now see, to me, of all the believable creatures out there, I guess to me the most believable, and people are going to maybe roll their eyes at me, I find Bigfoot the most believable of all when it comes to the paranormal, because to me I can see that Bigfoot being an offshoot of some sort of ape. But see, people have said to me too that they believe that Bigfoot is an interdimensional traveler, and that to me kind of makes me roll my eyes a little hard. I not that I don't have an imagination, Dave. It's just that, there's some things.
It's hard to go beyond what you've been taught and learned all your life. I mean, that's kind of. But we get it in the book. We get into interdimensional stuff big time. So we'll save that for later.
Right. All right, folks, welcome back. We've got John David Miller, and he is the author of The Sibold Effect. And we'll have a link up at our website, and we'll have a link up in the description of the show to take you to Amazon to get a hold of John David Miller's book called The Sibold Effect. The full title, John, is The Sibold Effect.
Oh, you're asking me?
Yeah.
Oh, Beyond Science, History, Ghost, and the Appalachian Supernatural.
I figured I'd give you a chance there to memorize your own title.
Yeah, gotcha. I still flub it up once in a while.
Yeah, just to see if you recognize it. Now, let me ask you this. This is a question that not a lot of authors get. Did you give that a long title, or was it your company that gave it that long of a title?
The book is self-published because nobody believed my story, so I did it all.
Really? Okay.
Oh yeah.
Because normally when I see a title that long, I go, "Oh, publisher got after you, did they?"
No, I just did my research on how to market a book, and subtitles are very important for keywords and that sort of thing. Yeah. And those keywords in that subtitle are very strong. And the Sibold Effect is not a good keyword.
No, that's true.
But the subtitle is.
It's a good title, though. The Sibold Effect is a very good title. But you're right. The subtitle is the one that, with all the keywords, is going to get people pulled in.
And to find it, right, exactly.
And to find it. Now, let me ask you this question. You're in Papua New Guinea, and we'll get to this, too, again, here in just a few minutes. We'll really get into the heart of the matter. You're in Papua New Guinea when you purchase the land in the Appalachians. Now, I got to ask, as far as Papua New Guinea goes,
why Papua New Guinea?
Yeah, I got to ask you, as far as traveling goes, we all think, different destinations we like to go to. Why Papua New Guinea? What was in Papua New Guinea at the time that intrigued you?
Okay, well, since I became an adventure nut as a kid, climbing around these caves, I became a scuba diver 20 years ago, something like that. And I hooked up with a couple, actually ER doctors, went on a dive trip to Cuba one trip, and we hooked up, and we just were, if you travel a lot, you know how miserable it is to travel with people you don't get along with. Right. But these two guys were also avid scuba divers, and they traveled. They had the same ideas that I did, and wanted to travel to the most obscure places on Earth, basically places where nobody else goes. So we never repeated a trip. We always picked somewhere new, and this was a trip, a dive trip on a boat, on a liveaboard boat around off the coast of Papua New Guinea in the Coral Sea. And we actually dove seamounts. These were mountaintops that didn't come up quite above the water, but we were able to scuba dive these all week long and never saw any land. But so it was one of these very unique trips. I was on. And now my girlfriend at the time was going to veterinary school at Virginia Tech in Blacksburg, Virginia, and I had a real estate agent looking for a house up there for about a year. Because it was better than renting something up there, but it was hard to find something. And while I was on the boat, I got a satellite call from my girlfriend, who got a call that day from the real estate agent and said he found a piece of property. It went on the market that day, but there were already 3 other offers on the property. And I'm floating on this boat, halfway around the world, and on a satellite phone call, which had like a 5-second delay on it, so it was a very tough conversation. But the gist of it was I knew that this property must be a good property. There's 3 other offers on it, and it was right in my price range that we were looking for. So I said, "What the heck, offer $1,000 over the asking price, and we'll see what happens." Mm-hmm. And this is the day before I was coming home through Sydney, Australia, that way. By the time I got back in the United States, I found out that I was the owner of this property.
Wow. Now let me. I'm going to take you off track a little bit here, and again,
okay.
We'll pick this back up in a minute. But you're a scuba diver, and definitely more than just a little bit of a hobby. Let's call it a passion. That's what it is, right?
Sure, absolutely.
Okay. As someone who's done, I would say, many dives, right? You've done many dives.
Sure.
Do you believe, I'm going to go, this is going to sound like a nutso question to you. Do you believe in the existence of the city of Atlantis, and do you believe that it is in the bottom of the ocean, or is that a bunch of hooey?
I believe in the city of Atlantis, and not necessarily in the bottom of the ocean. I just believe it's disappeared. I mean, through whatever. Maybe it existed during the era of Pangea, where all the continents were together, and then they broke up, and that was lost. I didn't know, but I was a firm believer in places like that. Sure.
Okay, but you don't believe it's sitting at the bottom of the ocean anymore?
Never really. Not necessarily.
Okay.
But I've also scuba dived in Egypt on the Red Sea,
okay.
And scuba dive over sites that had sarcophaguses down below, buried underneath. How they got them down there, I don't know. So I figured, all places on Earth, maybe one time they weren't underwater. Who knows?
Is that the most bizarre thing you've seen underwater, is those sarcophaguses?
Most bizarre thing. I don't know if any of it was bizarre. I think it was all just exciting. I don't think I ever saw any ruins, many ruins underwater.
Yeah.
But I've scuba dived, with whale sharks and a lot of the big animals and stuff like that too, which I always found just as exciting as anything else.
Is there any fear there? Because Dave will tell you, there's just no way he would get in the water and swim around sharks. Nuh-uh. No.
Oh, I've done many shark dives. Sharks are great. If you're down there with them, it's great. I was in Costa Rica one time, and I rolled off the back of the boat near Canio Island. And as soon as I rolled off the boat, I looked underwater, which you always would do, mm-hmm. And there were 3 bull sharks about 10 feet, 20 feet below me. And as soon as I looked at them, they looked up at me. And that was the only time I've ever gotten scared at all. And I had to think, well, what do you do? Do you go down there with them, or do you get back on the boat as quick as you can? And it was just a small little boat you had to climb up on. Well, I decided to go down with them. And as soon as I went underwater toward them, they went away. So I think my experience gave me the right decision, because I figured, well, if I had to kick my legs to get back up on that boat, I'm going to look like a crazy seal that's injured. Yeah. And they're going to come up and get me. So heck with that. I'd rather be face to face with them so I can see what they're doing. But other than that, I've been around sharks. I've got great pictures of tiger sharks. It's very exciting to dive with. Not scary at all, except for that one time.
So have you ever been attacked by a shark?
No, never.
No. So is that truly a rarity, to be attacked by a shark?
Oh, I think as a diver, absolutely. I think if you're floating on a surfboard and you're dangling your feet below, you look like a seal under there. And they're not eating you because they don't like you and you're human. In most cases, they if they ever do bite a scuba diver, they spit you right back out because they don't like the taste of rubber neoprene, and you don't have all that fat content that they wanted to seal. So no, never had a problem.
Interesting. I've never heard. This is really fascinating, Dave.
This whole story is going to be different than anything you've ever heard. I'll bet you on that.
I guess, yeah, because underwater stuff has always fascinated me. As well. I whenever I see something on television where there's an undersea dive, I get riveted by it, because that too is very much undiscovered country, and when you watch these different dives and you wonder. I mean, you see, when you see astronauts in space, you think, okay, that's brave as well. But when you see deep sea dives, you go, wow, no, that's bravery. I think one of the funnest things I ever did diving was drift diving at night. Really?
Most exciting thing you could ever do, because you're in like this current that's going maybe 2 or 3 knots, so it's really cruising. Uh-huh. But it's at night, and to me it reminded me of caving back as a kid, because you turn your lights on underwater at night, you can see everything. It's great, and it's a whole different ecosystem under there at night than it is during the day. But in drift diving, you actually you go underwater, and it's like, and the current just carries you along. It's like you're flying. It's the closest thing I can describe to actually flying, and it's like you're flying over the Grand Canyon, because you're flying over coral heads and everything, and the current is just dragging, it just pulling you along, and you're not paddling, you're not kicking, you're not doing anything, you're just cruising, watching everything with your flashlight, and you follow a dive guide who has a buoy tied around his waist, and the buoy's up on the surface, and you have a boat up there that follows the buoy. So if you ever get tired and want to get out of the water, you just go up to the surface, and the boat's right there and picks you up. So I have to say that's probably one of the most enjoyable types of dives I've ever done. But I've dived in strong currents. The Red Sea was really strong currents, and they could rip your mask off. They could rip your fins off. They were so bad. But that's not that enjoyable.
No.
But, the drift diving was fun.
I bet. So have you ever seen a species under the water that you just look at and you go, I have no idea what that is, and tried to cross-reference it and not found it?
All the time. In fact, and in fact, I talk about it in the book. The very beginning of the book starts off in Papua New Guinea, and we were at nighttime, and it was the last day of the dive. We were in the harbor of Port Moresby in Papua New Guinea, and what we were going to do that night was go look at flashlight fish. Mm-hmm. And flashlight fish are little 2 or 3 inch long fish that have bioluminescence in them, and they look like they have a flashlight in their head. Wow. What you do is we had to shimmy down an anchor line to a sunken trawler on the bottom of the harbor, about 100 feet down, and we would turn all the lights off because we didn't want to spook anything. We'd pull ourselves down by the anchor line, and then all huddle around the hole of the hole in the trawler where the cargo goes. And flashlight fish only come out on moonless nights about 20 minutes after it gets completely dark. And it just so happened that night was a completely moonless night, so we went down the chain, huddled around this big hole, I don't know what to call it, a hole in the cargo area, and all of a sudden, thousands and thousands of these flashlight fish poured out like water coming out of a fire hose, and they were all lit up like it was Christmas. And of course, I videotaped it, but videotape back then wasn't that good quality, so it didn't come out very good. Mm-hmm. But that was very exciting and a very unusual thing to see.
Wow. And then one last question here before we go to break. You're under the water for as much time as you spent there. We hear about phenomena called USO or unidentified submersible objects. Have you ever seen anything like that in the water?
Well, I think probably a lot of stuff I could classify as that. I know that diving the Galapagos Islands, you'd be diving along, and we were diving along a place called the Darwin's Arch, which is a great big stone, like a natural bridge of Virginia, but it's above water. But it's on top of a seamount, and you would dive and swim around the seamount. And if you were lucky, you would run into whale sharks. And these whale sharks are the biggest fish in the world. They're 60 feet long, and you'd be swimming swimming, or I don't know if you're swimming or are you diving. You'd be diving around, pedaling, kicking around, and all of a sudden, if you were looking in the right direction, you would see this enormous shadow, like a building, coming towards you. Now, fish can feel things in their nerves. They can tell when the water pressure changes around them. They always know what's around them. But when you're diving, you don't have that same tactile feeling. So you didn't know these sharks were there until they were right up on top of you. And they only eat plankton. They're not dangerous at all whatsoever. But that was very exciting to see that. But that's one of the more unusual things you'll see. But yeah, I see many things all over. Diving is like visiting another planet. You see creatures that you never knew existed, never could exist. And then if you dive right at dusk, when it's starting to get dark, you can watch the whole ecosystem change. The fish you saw before go away, and different fish come out. It's amazing.
Wow. John David Miller is our guest. He's the author of The Sibold Effect, Beyond Science, History, Ghosts, and the Appalachian Supernatural. You can get it on Amazon.com. We'll have a link up to it as well. Check out his website as well. And when we take the break here, it's thesiboldeffect.com, spelled Sibold, thesiboldeffect.com. When we come back, more with Dave Miller here on the best in Paranormal Talk Radio. This is Beyond the Darkness.
Beyond the Darkness.
Welcome back to the best in Paranormal Talk Radio. This is Beyond the Darkness. Tim Dennis in for Dave Schrader. He will be back tomorrow. We'll have a brand new show for you there. Today, let's not skip over today, folks. Today we have a very fascinating guest. John David Miller is our guest. He is the author of The Sibold Effect, Beyond Science, History, Ghosts, and the Appalachian Supernatural. And to catch you up, we're talking about Dave's experience with being out in Papua New Guinea. He's out there doing a dive, and at the time, he gets the author gets the opportunity of a lifetime to purchase a piece of property in the Appalachian Mountains in Virginia. He's never seen it, knows nothing about it. He gets a call from his agent. Dave says, offer $1,000 over the asking price. Let's see what happens. And at the time, Dave, you said you're purchasing this land. You have a girlfriend at the time, and you're pretty much just setting up this home for you and her, right?
That's correct. For half for her to live in while she's in school.
Okay, so for half for her to live in while she's in school. Sight unseen. Now take me through this. You're, like you said, you're in the middle of the ocean, and you're thinking, well, you know what? I've never seen the thing, but hey, what the heck? Let's just take a chance, throw an offer out there. No trepidation whatsoever. You need a place, and you can live in a cardboard box. You don't care, or is this a you know what? I need a place anyways. Let's go for it. Or do you just have that kind of spirit where you're, or you don't necessarily walk me through that for a second, because for me, I at least need to take a look at a place. Or did you just have a gut feeling like, you know what, this could be a good thing?
That's basically it. Through my experiences, and we talked about the caves in West Virginia, I learned to trust my intuition. I always thought that the intuition the first gut feelings you get are correct, and they may be from sources that aren't just you thinking things. I always felt the presence of something around me. Maybe you could look at it as a guardian angel or something like that. So I've been through many adventures, and I even talk about a few of them in the book where they could have drastically gone a bad way. Even being stabbed in Mexico, and when I was 16 years old, things like that. But I always felt I had a guardian angel over me, watching over me, and wasn't going to let something bad happen. But I always associated that to an intuition. I always felt that intuition was a communication event from something, who knows what, telling you, letting you know what really is going on. And at that moment when I was on that satellite phone call, something deep inside me told me to go for it. No thought, no question about it, what not to do. It just immediately had the gut feeling to go for it and to offer the $1,000 over it. And so I went for it.
Dave, you just can't throw out a statement like I was 16 years old and got stabbed in Mexico and not tell the story, man. Come on.
Well, yeah, I know. It's also in the book because it does play a big role. I was in Mexico visiting a friend of mine. He lived across the street from me here in Bon Air, Virginia, and his parents, his father lived in Nogales, Arizona. And Nogales, Arizona is a Mexican border town. One side is Nogales, Arizona. The other side is Nogales, Sonora, Mexico. And so I went to visit him, and it just so happened to be Cinco de Mayo, the Mexican independence, the day I was there. And so we decided to walk over to the border, which we drove to the border, then just walked over to Nogales, Sonora, and had dinner at a place called the Cavern, I believe it was called. And so me and my friend are 16 years old. We're out and about by ourselves walking through Nogales, Sonora. And, of course, in Mexico, there's no age limit to drink and that sort of thing. And so we went and bought a beer, and we were walking around, and it sounds crazy, but it just all of a sudden, I guess the Cinco de Mayo celebration started to kick in, and we were walking down the street, and a beer bottle flew over our heads through a window of a bar that was beside us. So we dived down behind a truck. And actually, we were laughing our heads off at this time. Don't ask me why. We were 16 years old, wild in Mexico, I guess. And so we dived behind this trash truck. And not too long after that, we noticed the trash truck was on fire in the back.
Oh, my God.
And then the Mexican fire department came. It was like an old pump truck with bunch of Mexicans hanging off the back of the side of it, and they come up and put the fire out, and everybody just turned around like it never happened and kept on going. So, and we were laughing our heads off at the time and couldn't believe what was going on. And we walking down the street, and we ran into another kid. He was older than us, but he offered to show us around. And of course, us not knowing better, we said sure. And so we started following him, and we started walking up some steps on the side of a cliff in the town, and we didn't know where we were going, but we kept on going up the cliff, up these stone steps. And by the time we got to the top, there was 20 of these people around us. So it was like they came out of the darkness and kind of added on to the group as we walked up to the hill. And maybe 6 or 7 surrounded me, six or 7 surrounded my friend, and each one grabbed a belt loop.
Oh.
And there was a cliff right beside us. So it was a big cliff. We had these guys with their fingers in our belt loops, and so we couldn't do anything. And they wanted to take my coat off. I guess they wanted to search us or whatever like that. But in Mexico there, it gets cold at night. It's warm in the day, cold at night. And for some reason, I didn't let them take my coat off. And I thought the guy in front of me hit me in the stomach. But it didn't hurt one little bit. It didn't hurt whatsoever. And as soon as that happened, the whole crowd got nicer, got friendlier all of a sudden. They just loosened up, and they let go of the belt loops and gave us our wallets back. We didn't have any money on us anyway, so and they eventually let us go. But I think it was because, and then that we got back to the house that night and went to bed. Of course, didn't tell anybody what happened, and woke up that morning, and I had blood all over the sheets, and I had a cut in my stomach. And I ended up having a scar for a year. I never went to a doctor or anything, so I didn't want people to know about it. But I also wore that scar like the red badge of courage for all my friends for the rest of my life. But I think the act of and that's another time where I think that the guardian angel was looking after it and didn't let anything happen to us. But I think because I didn't react the way they thought I was going to react when I got hit or stabbed, they let up and changed their tune. So,
boy, I'll say,
yeah,
you got lucky, my friend.
I got lucky. Well, I never considered it lucky. I always considered somebody looking over me.
You looked at it as being blessed, not lucky. I get that.
Exactly.
I get that. So you let's get to the point now where you say, okay, $1,000 over. You threw out the offer. At what point now, and you go to do your dive? At what point do you get the call back from the realtor?
Not until I'm back in the Sydney, Australia, in the airport, and I had to look for that. I only had a short period of time. I found a bank of phones and got in hold of my girlfriend, and that's when she told me that they accepted my offer.
Is your girlfriend concerned at this point that I just bought a house sight unseen? It's time to move, honey?
Well, actually, she went and saw it.
Oh, okay.
But her only observation of the place was it has a decent view.
That was it? That's all she told you?
That's all she told me. I don't know why. I think she might have been a little bit, maybe somewhat embarrassed that her boyfriend was buying her house. I don't know. But and she ended up living in this house for 4 years.
Really?
Yeah.
Now, walk me through this. So you're in Sydney. When you get on the plane and you come home, is your first move to go look at the house, to go see what you're getting into?
Yes. I lived in Richmond, Virginia, and Blacksburg's about 3 or 4 hours away. So I don't quite remember exactly when I went, but it was a short period of time before I got to see the property for the first time. And when I saw the property for the first time, I was astounded. I was absolutely astounded. When I walked up to this house, later on I come to find that this house was built for the mill manager. It overlooks a creek and a dam. The mill's no longer there. It overlooks 3 different mountains. I've traveled all over the world, and it's probably one of the most beautiful places I've ever seen in my entire life. Sounds like you're at the ocean when you're on the front porch because of the creek going over the dam. So I walk up on the front porch the very first day, and I get those same chill bumps that I got as a kid and get every once in a while. As I looked over the porch railing on this beautiful view, I got the chill bumps up and down my spine like crazy. I don't think it affected my girlfriend at all. and the view was the most astounding view I've ever seen in my life. So I don't know what she was looking at when she told me, but I had no earthly idea what I was walking into at that moment. But as soon as I walked up on that porch, I knew that this was a very, very special place, and something really special was going on here. I just didn't know what it was.
So that intuition is kicking in, and you're getting intrigued by it. Now, what's your first move when you get those chill bumps? What do you start looking into the history of the place, or what is it that intrigues you about it?
Just a few days later, I got a question from the insurance company. They said, your house that you just bought is in the floodplain. We're not going to be able to insure it. And I was going, well, this is kind of weird. It sits up on the side of a mountain. It's not really in a floodplain.
Right.
So I get the plat of the property out, which I had, to look at, see what the deal was. And I immediately noticed that the mailbox down at the bottom of the driveway was down by the creek, which is in the floodplain. So the only thing in the floodplain of the whole property is my mailbox.
Well, and if you get soggy mail, it's all over and done with, Dave. I mean,
That's right. You got to go get your mail during a flood, you're screwed.
Yeah, I mean, you might as well just sell it right now. I mean, who wants soggy mail?
Exactly. So when I got the plat out, I also noticed at the bottom corner of the plat was my mother's maiden name written there, Sibold. So that's when everything started kicking in, that something very, very odd is going on here. It doesn't really seem like a coincidence that I came across this place.
So Now, forgive me for asking this. Is your mother alive at this point that you can cross?
Yes, she's still alive now, right?
Okay.
Exactly.
Okay,
Yes.
so do you call Mom at this point and say, "Hey, Mom, I think your ancestors used to live here"?
I believe I did. Actually, the name on the bottom of the corner of the plant was Frank W. Sibold.
Okay.
It wasn't her whole name; it was her last name.
Right. Right.
So, this house also is only about 30 miles away as the crow flies from Greenville, West Virginia, where I grew up with the Sibolds.
Uh-huh.
So I knew the Sibolds had connections to the area, and I knew they had somewhat of a connection to Blacksburg, Virginia. I knew that since I was a kid, but that's all I knew. That's all I knew.
So, do you start immediately at that point digging into the Sibold family history?
Yes, okay. Immediately. And what I found out from there is 10 times more astounding.
So,
are you ready?
I'm ready. I'm ready. Hit me with it, Dave.
Okay. The first thing I found out was that of the first 5 women that graduated from Virginia Tech in 1925, 2 of them are related to me. Now, Virginia Tech is only 7 miles away from this house, down the mountain. And so I delve into that research and one of these there was a Carrie Sibold was I related to, and there was a Lucy Lee Lancaster. Lucy Lee Lancaster became the librarian at Virginia Tech for the next 52 years.
Oh, wow.
And her hobbies was genealogy and travel. And now her papers are archived at the Virginia Tech Library called the Lucy Lee Lancaster Collection. There are 40 cubic feet of her papers in the library. So, of course, I go and look through all these 40 boxes of papers. And that's when I discovered that the property that I just bought sight unseen was connected to 3 of my first-generation grandfathers from 1738. 3 different bloodlines to that particular property.
Wow.
It turns out that they were the founding fathers of the New River German settlement, and they came over on the same boat together into Philadelphia on 1738 and made their way down and were the first European settlers on the New River. And one of those grandfathers picked that property I bought as a mill site back in 1740. So then now I know it's no accident that I came to be here. But now the mystery is, why was I brought here?
Right.
And what was I supposed to find?
Right. That's you didn't even need Henry Louis Gates to bring you into your family history. You just did it on intuition.
Exactly. So I'm convinced at this point everything is on purpose. But who would bring me here, and why would they bring me here? But they certainly did, because the odds are that they didn't are astronomical.
So, do you believe that there's some family mystery that's unsolved that you were brought there basically to wrap up?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I just knew it, that I was brought there for a reason, and it was my job now to figure out what that was.
Okay.
But it took me the first 10 years I owned the property. I did research on it. So the history of this piece of property is incredible. It's connected to George Washington, the French and Indian War, the Draper's Meadow Massacre, which happened on Virginia Tech property in 1755. All connected to the piece of property I just bought. And I knew there were a lot of Indian trails. I mapped out all the Indian trails in the area, because I knew there was one close to this property. Also sits in a water gap of the mountains. It's the only pass through the mountains you can get from east to west in that area. So anybody from the beginning of history that traveled east or west in that area had to cross over my property. So now I'm saying all this history is embedded. The history, the spiritual essence of all this history is embedded in this piece of property. But this is the first 10 years, and the history is incredible. And the first half of the book is all about the Indian history in that area and the history of the property and that sort of thing.
Very interesting indeed. So you're digging up all this rich history and everything that's tied to your family. And at this point, had you had a clue that the Sibolds were this tied to Americana, or was this something that you had a clue about?
I knew, all I knew was the Sibolds had something to do with where Virginia Tech was now located. And I eventually found the old Sibold graveyard, which is right on the side of Route 460, right beside Virginia Tech. But I didn't. That's all I knew. That's all I knew was the connection with the Sibolds were early settlers in that area on the Virginia Tech property.
So at this point, I gotta think your head is just swimming.
Yeah, but it started back then. I started telling people all about this, but nobody believes it. Everybody's fascinated with the point that I came to this piece of property sight unseen, and it turned out to belong to my family. Mm-hmm. That's really the basis of everything. But that's all anybody believed. They obviously didn't have the same passion I did about the property. But I kept on and on because I knew I still hadn't solved why I was brought there and what was unique about this piece of property.
I can kind of relate to your story, Dave, and here's why. And again, it's not anything I've ever shared on air, but I'll share it with you because no one's listening. No, I'm kidding. But there's a lot of people listening. And here's what it is as far as family genealogy goes. The one thing that I have shared with our audience before is that my 17th great grandfather was the fourth Grand Master of the Knights Templar. And
oh, cool.
Yeah, and that's cool information in itself. But some of the descendants are like a who's who of not only of history, like one of my great aunties is Joan of Arc.
Really? Wow.
Yeah, and she's the patron saint of radio. Go figure. Yeah, of all things. But there's all these descendants of Bernard de Tremblay, and it's strange. I mean, everybody from James Dean to Tom Landry, former coach of the Dallas Cowboys, to
sure.
Bob Hope. I mean, in Madonna, of all people, it's weird. I mean, there's these in Alanis Morissette, and you go to these different famous people who kind of fork off the family tree, and they say that the family is tied to Merovingian blood and all this stuff, and when you start to follow this family tree, you look at it and you say it's absolutely insane. There's just no way, it's and you kind of shake your head. And when you tell people about it, they go, "Oh yeah, okay, sure." Like I'm related to Machiavelli. There's just no way that you go really, stuff like that. And when you tell people that, they go, "Oh yeah, okay, that's nice," and then they move on with their day. And you go, "No, but really." I'm related to Machiavelli.
That's right. Absolutely agree. The book will change everything you ever thought about ancestral spirits. It did me, and it's all documented scientifically. It took me 3 years to write it, to research it, and it's heavily scientifically documented. But it's all about ancestral spirits. And their relativity of what's going on today.
Okay.
Anyway,
now,
we'll get to that.
I'm going to ask you this question too, Dave. Now, at some point, when you're doing this type of research, especially when you're talking about recent history,
sure.
And you're holding onto a piece of property that belongs to ancestors, you get into a paranormal aspect of it, where you think, you know what? I can only do so much as far as history goes, touching physical documents, doing the physical work. Now I got to kind of go to the paranormal side of things.
Right.
What paranormal research did you do in this case? Did you attack it from a psychic standpoint? Did you do some paranormal investigation on the house? What did you do on the paranormal side of things?
Good question. I got a chapter in the book called The Seventh Step. And now the first 10 years I had this property, it was all history related. The history, documenting the history, what happened to the property. But like I said, it was connected to all these strange events and famous people. But after 10 years, 5 years ago, I took the property over for myself. The girlfriend's gone, but I still have the property, of course. And so I took it over for myself because I still know I have this great connection to the property and that something's going on. But this is the first time I was able to live in this house for any period of time whatsoever. It was always just weekends before or whatever. So I started living in the house, and I started a remodeling project on the house because it needed major, new floors and things like that. And so I started that process, and I got to the stairway that went upstairs, and it was covered in paint, multi-layers of paint, carpeting, you name it. And the only way to restore it was to hand scrape it down to the bare wood. And under the bare wood, I could even see the grain through the paint and everything. It was beautiful, maybe 300-year-old white oak steps underneath it.
Wow.
And so I had to hand scrape it down to the bare wood to where you actually smelled the wood like it was cut fresh that day. Mm-hmm. To me, it was like the first time in 200 years that this stairway I got a breath of fresh air. So I had to hand scrape each step. And so it was 12 steps altogether. So I started on step number 1. When I got to step number 7 and sat down on the step, the same chill bumps came back up and down my spine uncontrollably. I would step off the step either backwards or up above it, and the chill bumps would go away. So I'm thinking at that point, this house is definitely haunted. Something's going on here. Mm-hmm. So that's when I started watching every ghost show I could find to try to find out how to investigate it, to find out what's going on. And of course, I'm experiencing this all by myself, so I don't have any collaboration with anybody else. Mm-hmm. So I study all the ghost shows, and the first thing I do is an EVP on my iPhone, and when I pass over the 7th step and I'm talking, so I wonder what's here and that sort of thing, you get a squelch on my. I could see the meters of the recorder going crazy, but I couldn't hear anything. And I went back and listened to it, and it was like an electronic squelch. It wasn't like a voice telling me something. It was more like something was interfering with my equipment to communicate with me. So it felt like a communication event. It didn't feel like it wasn't scary again at all. It was exhilarating. And I knew something was going on, but I thought I took it as a communication event. And I also knew all that I forgot to mention, this house also sits on the sacred hunting grounds of the Cherokee Indians. That's a big point I forgot to mention. So I get this electronic squelch, and so I attribute that to maybe ancient Indian spirits trying to contact me, but they can't speak my language, obviously, and they can't speak human. So what better way to get my attention than give me something, like affect my equipment somehow, make me notice, which I did. Okay. And that led me to buy an infrared video camera. I think I bought a cheap Panasonic infrared camera and film the steps at night. And that's the first time I got paranormal activity on the video camera. And do you want me to explain that exactly? But
yeah, what'd you get? Keep going. Don't stop now, Dave.
I started panning up and down the steps, in complete darkness with this pretty cheap video camera, but it was HD. And every time I would pass the camera, I'd scan over the steps, and when I brought the camera back down over the steps, I would lose 2 frames. I only knew this because I could go back on the film and look and tell that it was 2 frames missing. Mm-hmm. They went black. So I made the pass of the steps 3 times. First time, I lost 2 frames. Second time, I lost 2 frames. Third time, I lost 2 frames. And then when I was panning back over the 7th step, you could see something just barely jump off the step at the exact spot where I was getting the chill bumps. And this, I can only explain it as a piece of ectoplasm that morphed in shape. And it only showed up in 3 frames, which meant that it traveled at 1/10 of a second. It's 30 frames per second, so it was 1/10 of a second that ectoplasm jumped off the 7th step. And I've got those 3 frames, so I know it happened. And then once you know it happens, you can go back and see it on the film.
Okay.
Just briefly, but you can see it.
Okay.
And so that was my first paranormal video that I took.
Oh, very cool.
But it came right off the 7th step, and it's all that's the way I associated. And then I started filming all over the house, of course.
Yeah, well, yeah.
And then I got really good orb videos, nothing like you see on TV, orbs with trails on them. But at that point, I'm not seeing this ectoplasm anymore. I'm seeing round orbs.
Okay.
And I'm thinking, I don't know why I'm thinking this, but I'm thinking whatever's trying to contact me is manifesting themselves in a way that I'll recognize. It's like a mind meld with whatever's going on with they're actually manifesting themselves into a manifestation that I can recognize. And at that time, I was looking at all the ghost shows, and they're all showing orbs.
Okay.
So now I'm filming orbs. And after that, I started filming everywhere in the house. I'm getting more orbs. I'm getting streaks of light. I'm getting everything, and that brings me outside to the front porch, where I also got extreme EVP meter readings. And then I started filming outside and got all different types of shapes of orb-like material, but they're different shapes. They're not orbs anymore. They're different, hundreds of different shapes.
Okay.
And I'm able to go in and grab these screenshots off the video.
Okay.
So I know they're there.
Okay. So you've assembled all this evidence yourself, and you do have it on your website, right? The SiboldEffect.com? Okay. So people can go and take a look for themselves.
Yes, I also got a YouTube channel called Dav Miller. Okay. And I got 20-some videos on there.
Oh, good. Okay, so people can look at the evidence there as well and take a look
and make whatever decision they want. Now that's not the only supernatural activity that I filmed and photographed on the property either.
Well, please tell us. Tell us. Yeah.
There's so much more.
Okay, please tell us.
I noticed right off the bat, too, while I was staying there and was able to observe things, that every time there was a weather event, the creek out front would start to bubble up like a witch's cauldron. And I started filming after these events, and I started filming. I think the first time I filmed, it was a snowfall, and it looks like the flakes were tremendously huge. So I took pictures of this in high-resolution film.
Okay.
And when I went back and looked at that film, these weren't snowflakes I was looking at. There's one shaped like a Pegasus, the horse. They're small, but they're obviously not snowflakes. So I'm starting to get the feeling now that there's a huge energy levels on this property. And I go through this in depth in my book of different types of energy that are being generated off this piece of property. And my feeling at that time is now this energy is whatever I'm seeing is using to manifest themselves. That, like you've heard the expression, the veil is thin.
Right.
I think the veil is extremely thin on this piece of property. And I even started filming the creek when it started to bubble up. And I've got things swimming in the water that I can't identify. And again, what I filmed in the water shows up in 3 frames only. So it shows it's what I call a supernatural speed of 1/10 of a second. You see something swim through the. I think this video is on the website.
Okay.
And I eventually, after research, I associate this to being an undine. You know what they are?
No, what's that?
They're one of the elements, one of the elementals.
Okay.
They're the ones in the water.
Oh,
they're
okay.
like mermaids and things like that are called undines. But this looks more like a flower that's swimming.
Oh.
It's the most oddest thing I've ever seen in my life. But
wow.
to show people this, they look at you like you're crazy. So even if you have it on film.
Wow.
So, but anyway, so I've got all this paranormal activity going on everywhere in all different types of forms, but it's obvious to me that it's something to do with the energy levels from this one piece of property. Because you got acid, under research you can find out that acid rain on limestone can produce sulfuric acid.
Okay.
And so that's where I was kind of leaning toward, why the water was bubbling up like a witch's cauldron.
Right. Yeah. That would make sense. Yeah. But the amount, does it say what amount of acid rain would take in order to create that sulfuric acid?
No, but it's just one of many different type of natural energy sources in that area. So there's all kinds of springs flowing through the limestone rock, and the limestone, has a spiritual essence to it also, because limestone is nothing more than the shells and bodies of ancient organisms that were at the bottom of the ocean.
Yeah, and especially like in our experiences of being up at the Stanley Hotel in Estes Park, Colorado, there's a lot of limestone around there, and even here in Minnesota, there's a lot of limestone as well. So a lot of properties that claim to have hauntings have a lot of limestone around them.
Yeah, I think the limestone has a lot to do with the conductivity of the spiritual essence, or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah. Yep. So there's some interesting questions I have here too about the property as well. So you've got limestone there, you've got water, of course, running through there, and you've mentioned Nazca lines or ley lines.
Right. Yeah, I got to talk about ley lines and all the other type of. The ley lines are not natural. They're supposedly man-made. Because of the lining of stones or whatever like that. But there's a lot of energy sources that are naturally made that offer the same type of energy.
So are you saying the ley lines are man-made on your property?
Well, no, the ley lines, if you study the definition of ley lines, they're really, it means they're alignment of stones that produce energy somehow. I'm not sure. But I go through every source of energy I can find to try to figure out what's going on with this property.
Okay, so are there...
ley lines were just one of them.
Okay, so are there both natural energy lines and ley lines on that property?
I believe so, yes.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Now, I would ask you this question, Dave. Do you believe that there were other supernatural goings-on in your family on that property? Is there a supernatural history to that property?
Not known, no. But obviously, I associate what's going on that property with my ancestors.
Okay.
And so I associate it directly to either ancestral spirits or ancient Indian spirits.
Reason I ask is because the way you describe certain things, and you can attribute the haunting just to the spirit. I mean, when you mention things like battles and American history and things that have happened on that property, of course, there could be residual hauntings. There could be an active haunting, for all I know, as well.
Absolutely.
But at the same time, when you mention things like creeks bubbling up and ectoplasm and different things that seem like they're outside of a normal, typical haunting, the first thing that comes to mind, as far as I'm concerned, is I guess the first intuitive thing that comes to mind is, did your family have something to do with what's a good way of putting it? More of a natural religious order?
Well, I go through it in the book. I go through their religious beliefs and that sort of thing. But I never considered it a haunting of any type. Never. It was a communication event from beyond, is what I figured, and I figured they're trying to show me something. I just had to figure out. It's like they were giving me giving me clues. If I figured out one clue, they would give me another. And it's just like how they brought me. They started contacting me on the stairs. Then they brought me over to the rest of the house. Then they brought me out to the front porch. Then they brought me out down by the creek, And all step by step, once I figured out what was going on here, I went somewhere. It drove me somewhere else. And eventually I found out exactly what they were trying to show me.
All right, so let me, without divulging it, because of course you have a book to sell. I realize this. Do you believe that they've unveiled the full message to you, or do you believe that there's more to the message still that you're the strange thing about this all, I knew something was going on from the very beginning, so I photographed everything as I went. It's a very, and the book is written that way. It's almost, I started it off as a photo journal of what's going on. And I could see how it was progressing, what clues they were giving me. And by the time I got to the last chapter of the book, I figured out what was going on. When I started the book, I had no idea. I didn't know. I knew something needed to be told, but I didn't know what it was. But I figured it out, and just following these clues step by step. So, like I said, it was no haunting at all. No haunting at all.
That I can well, in a traditional sense of a haunting, it was more of a collaboration between ancient Indian spirits, ancestral spirits, conspiring with each other to bring me to this piece of property to show me what they needed to show me. That's when you get really beyond. But that's what I felt was going on, and I think that's exactly what happened. And it exactly worked out exactly how they planned it for me to find out what was going on.
So you've gotten this message from beyond. Was this message to, again, because you got a book to sell? Was this?
The story is so wild. I don't mind telling you everything about the book you need to know, because the main story is really cool. But it's the backstory that will blow your mind.
Really? On
why I was brought there, how I was brought there, and what I found.
Well, what are you willing to tell us? I guess is what.
I don't mind. You're not going to believe me anyway.
No, try me. Well, go ahead.
I'm kidding anyway. Well, like I said before, it kept on bringing me outside. To the point where my senses were at an extreme level. I was sensitive to everything. I was noticing everything because everything was important, and I couldn't figure out what was going on. So it eventually brought me outside. Now, I had done a lot of research. I had mapped out all the old Indian trails in the area. Now, this house also sits on limestone. There's the same limestone belt that the caves in Greenville are in, by the way. Mm-hmm. So I thought that was interesting.
Really?
So it brings me outside. And I knew that an old Indian trail had to go somewhere near my property, because my property sits in the gap of the mountains, and this is the only way from human existence where they travel back and forth. They had to travel across my property. So I mapped out all the Indian trails, and then one morning I was out drinking my coffee on the front porch, and I was after a really light snow, and I looked out across my yard, and I could see the outline of an old trail going right across my property. And you could see it because of the white of the snow and the brown dead leaves. And as soon as I saw it, I said, "That's must be the only piece of Indian trail left in existence in this area, is right across my property." So I went out and started searching this trail. And I went out to the end of the trail where it's cut off at the road where the mill was, and they built in a road, but they cut off kind of a side of the mountain right there, and that's where the trail ended. Right at the end of the trail was an old rock overlooking the mill, basically. Okay. But it was obviously had carvings on it. And I was thinking at that point that it was a trail marker or something. You know, this property could have been surveyed by George Washington or William Preston, all these people that were surveyors. So I thought it might be a trail marker. So I started taking high definition photographs of everything around me. And in studying those photographs, I realized that these rocks were carved. All the rocks along the trail were actually carved. And not unlike anything you've ever seen in your life. So, but you can only see these after studying high definition photographs. And once I discovered that, I discovered all kinds of petroglyphs. The whole side of the mountain is basically carved. I believe I have this is when it gets really hard to believe, too.
Okay.
I believe there's an area with a sacred temple. I believe the rocks have special alignments to them. They're carved in a certain way. And around all the bases of these megaliths were portable artifacts, which now I have hundreds of them. And they're all carved exactly like the major petroglyphs. So what that tells me that there was a religious significance to the way they buried these portable artifacts around the bigger permanent units, which made it more of a sacred site.
Okay.
So that's when I got start to realize that there's in fact, I didn't even use this term until I wrote 3 articles for Ancient Origins magazine, where they think that I have discovered an ancient civilization on my property. And that's when you start to get into real trouble with the scientific community. When you mention ancient civilizations, they go crazy. They go absolutely crazy because they're taught that these things that I just found don't exist. But the book has 300 photographs in it, and I document everything as it happened. I even document me discovering the Indian Trail. I took photographs of it that day, and those are in the book. So it's very heavily documented, but yet it's very hard to bring that subject up to most people.
See, that's not so hard. That sounds actually very cool. I totally believe.
Oh, it's a cool. I think it's the coolest story ever. That's why. But when I started telling, I had the state archaeologist out there, and he was fascinated. I don't get so much pushback on the paranormal end of it. I get the pushback on the archaeological end of it more than they think. Oh yeah, that actually surprised me, because I had documented evidence of it all. But that's what the scientific community, they're taught that this stuff doesn't exist, so it's kind of very hard to get people to take it seriously. But that's the reason I wrote the book, self-published the book, because no publisher would touch it.
Really?
But the whole book is documented throughout. It's got 300 photographs, so I try to document it that way.
Wow, I'm absolutely shocked that I am, Dave. I'm absolutely shocked that no publisher would want to tackle.
Well, I probably didn't approach it in the best way when I first was getting it out there, because I didn't really quite know what was going on at the time either. Like I said, it was not until I finished the book that I figured out whatever. And the whole book is about there are no coincidences. Everything happens for a reason, and everything's connected. And at the end of the book, I bring the Devil's Writing Table back in there, because it has a huge significance to this piece of property, because it has a lot to do with numerology. Sacred geometry is all involved in the story. And the circle with a horizontal line has huge mythological and religious meanings behind it. And I didn't realize that until I did research on it.
And so you believe that this ancient now let's break this down. That ancient civilization that was on your property, do you believe that was an American Indian civilization, or do you believe it was something else?
I believe it may be the ancestors to the American Indian, but also there was all folklore story about ancient aliens coming in from the what's the name of the planet? Proton, I believe.
Okay.
And they became the ancestors to the East Coast American Indian. And so that's what's going through my head. And I found a lot of rock carvings, and I got a couple of them in the book, that show aliens, in my opinion, on carved in rocks.
All right. Well, there you go. And
this kind of brings it full circle back to the Nazca lines and that sort of thing. But this one rock carving I have looks like an alien face-off. It looks like a reptilian face-to-face with a gray.
Really?
And it's so sophisticated that it doesn't look real. So I don't. So now my theory is that it's either the first Indian ancestors in that area, but they were so creative and sophisticated that I'm thinking maybe I lost. I go in the book about how a lot of people believe that the races on Earth are all from alien, settlements.
Okay.
You still there?
Yeah, I'm here. Yeah.
Something that's beeped. It might have been my phone. Let me switch phones right quick here.
Sure.
You there?
Yep.
Okay. I think my phone was going dead. So I'm thinking that it could very well be an ancient alien settlement built on this property, and then my ancestors came in and built their colony directly on top of this ancient colony, which also brings up really cool things, pictures in your head.
Oh yeah.
So I talk about it in the book about being iconoclastic behavior, meaning because I also connected this property to Machu Picchu, which I've been to,
okay.
and it's the same in Machu Picchu. There's one civilization built on another civilization built on another civilization, and that's what I think happened on my property. It has this ancient civilization. Then the American Indian came and used this area as a sacred hunting grounds, and then my ancestors came in and inadvertently built their mill and their dam directly on top of the ruins of which I call the Lost Tribe of Clover Hollow.
Wow.
So the story's huge.
It is huge.
And
yeah.
And I appreciate the time to talk about it, because a lot of people, it's very difficult to explain.
Well, it's
as you can imagine.
It is a long, complicated story, but it's an interesting and intriguing story at that. And again, folks, if you want to get all the details on it, the book is called The Sibold Effect: Beyond Science, History, Ghosts, and the Appalachian Supernatural. Our guest is John David Miller, and we'll have a link up for it at our site and on the description for this show as well. You can click on that link at Amazon.com and pick up the book. Also, check out Dave's website. It's called thesiboldeffect.com, SIBOLD effect.com. And that's where Dave has some of his videos there that you can check out. Also, what was the YouTube site again that has all the different videos and evidence?
Yeah, I think it's my channel. It's called Dav Miller, D-A-V Miller.
Okay.
All one word.
So be sure to check out Dave's evidence there as well. Dave, thank you very much for being with us today. This was a very intriguing, interesting program, and I'm going to check out the stuff as well, because again, that's an ancient civilization, whether it be alien, Indian, or otherwise, is intriguing to have on your property, and the fact that you were led through that over that time, and that you've become one with history is really amazing and fascinating.
I have signed a contract with the film studio too, by the way.
Oh, that's
so maybe
very cool.
maybe the story one day will be told like it is.
That would be completely awesome. That really would be. Again, thank you, Dave, for being with us, and we really do appreciate the time today. That'll be awesome. And again, folks, check out Dave's website, thesiboldeffect.com, for more information on the story, and check out his book as well. We'll have a link on our page and on the description for the show at podcast1.com. Again, Dave will be with us. Dave Schrader will be with us tomorrow for a brand new episode of The Best in Paranormal Talk Radio. I'm Tim Dennis for Dave Schrader, and you've been listening to Beyond the Darkness.